Freedom fighters, freedom lovers, and those who just want stuff for free. Greetings and hello. It is I, your favorite undocumented social studies teacher, whose personal pronouns are freedom and liberty, Mr. Palumbo, and this is the one and only Professor Liberty Podcast. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I really appreciate the tens and tens of followers we have on the show, and darn it, we do our best to give you a quality show that is not only informative, but entertaining. If you have any criticisms, however, please remember that the show is indeed free. So you can keep your actualies to yourself. You know what I'm talking about. You follow, you hit these people on social media. Actually, Mr. Palumbo, you are not correct because I watched a TikTok once and they said something about communism hasn't really been tried. It hasn't been real communism, Mr. Palumbo. Anyway, back to the email. The email is professorliberty1776@gmail.com. That's professorliberty1776@gmail.com. Please send me your thoughts, words, prayers, condolences, ideas, convictions, aberrations, abbreviations, considerations, did I already say that? Consolidations, whatever. Just send them to professorliberty1776@gmail.com. All right, on to the show. Well, it's summer here. That, of course, means it's that time of the year where I promise to provide you, the audience, with a barrage of new, gripping, and thoughtful episodes that I never live up to. So I'm not going to make that promise, only to break it. I'm not a politician. I will say that I will continue to work on this Important Battles series, mainly because, based on the download data, it appears this is what you guys like. You guys like this topic. I'm getting a lot of traffic. So you diehards know, here at Professor Liberty, we don't just talk history or politics or economics. We do like to dive into the cultural and life issues as well. One of my favorite quotes is from Aristotle, who said, "Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all." And what does this mean? Well, it means we can't just learn facts. We have to learn morals, ethics, virtues. And so I have a few episodes swimming around in the old noggin that I'd like to get out there. We're not just talking history and economics and politics. We do the cultural stuff as well. So this summer, some of that will appear. Today's episode, we're going to continue our series on important battles. And today we're going to talk about the battle at Thermopylae. And to be honest, I had to do a little more research than usual because I don't touch much on this in class throughout the year. We talk about the Peloponnesian War a little bit. We do talk about Thermopylae a little bit, but it's just a little blurb. So I had to do a little digging today, which is good. And of course, remember, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, all you internet scholars out there, I have never claimed to be an expert. Remember, I have just enough expertise to make things interesting. Like most people, I can tend to get swept up in the mythology of Thermopylae, or the Hollywood portrayal of historic events. Why? Well, Thermopylae has all the ingredients that people, especially men, yearn for. Things like bravery, self-sacrifice, brothers in arms, overwhelming odds, and the list goes on. And even today's mamby-pamby soy boys, those Jedi masters with their plastic lightsabers and pink hair, things like that even resonate with them. And if I can just go on a tangent for a minute, I believe this is one reason why movies today are flopping. Most movies today have gone woke, and they portray the actual opposite of what humanity throughout the millennia respond to. Instead of the brave male leadership, we get the girl boss. Instead of brothers in arms, we get everyone's an individual. Instead of dying for your nation for a noble cause, we get we are the world. Well, as you're going to see here shortly, Thermopylae had none of that. The Battle of Thermopylae took place in 480 BC during the Greco-Persian Wars. It was a significant conflict between the alliance of Greek city-states led by King Leonidas of Sparta and the Persian Empire led by King Xerxes. To understand the historical background, first let's kind of set the table with a couple key components. The events that made the Greco-Persian War and then subsequently the battle at Thermopylae were things like the Ionian Revolt in 499 to 493 BC. The Ionian Greek city-states in Asia Minor revolted against Persian rule. Although the revolt was eventually suppressed by the Persians, it marked the beginning of the Greco-Persian Wars. That was followed by the first Persian invasion of Greece in 490. In retaliation for the Athenian support of the Ionian Revolt, King Darius I launched an invasion into Greece. The Athenians defeated the Persians at the Battle of Marathon, you guys might know that, marking a significant victory for the Greeks and a subsequent embarrassment for the Persians, who are supposed to be the superpower of the time. And the last event that makes up the greater context of what we're talking about is the second Persian invasion in 480. This is where Xerxes I, the son of Darius, sought to avenge his father's defeat and conquer Greece. And he's going to amass a huge army, as well as a huge navy, all with the mission of taking down the Greeks. And it is during this time of the second Persian invasion that Thermopylae takes place. The Battle of Thermopylae unfolded when Xerxes' army, estimated to be in the hundreds of thousands, encountered the Greek forces led by King Leonidas. Despite being vastly outnumbered, the Greeks, including 300 Spartans, fought valiantly to hold off the Persian advance. The narrowness of the Thermopylae Pass, or the Thermopylae Gates is what they called it, limited the Persian army's numerical advantage, allowing the Greeks to hold their ground for several days. Now, there's a common misconception here that it was only the Spartans that held off the Persian horde, and this is not true. The Spartans were definitely the tip of the spear, the special forces, if you will, the military elite, but they were also bolstered by a coalition of soldiers from other Greek city-states. At the heart of this legendary confrontation are two towering figures, and let's talk about them. The first one is King Leonidas of Sparta. He was born into Spartan royalty around 540 BC, and Leonidas' path was already predetermined, as most Spartan kings were. He would be trained as a young man in the rigorous Spartan way, which was a system designed to forge fearless warriors. And Leonidas' life would unfold against this backdrop of what we're talking about, this burgeoning conflict of what would soon be called the Greco-Persian Wars. Now, there's some dispute over how old Leonidas was. Some say he was middle-aged, some say he was young. I've even read somewhere that he was older. I mean, if we're just going off the dates, he would be around 50 years old during the Battle of Thermopylae, which obviously would be pretty impressive, right? I mean, this guy must have been a physical specimen. He's not eating hamburgers. He's not eating Big Macs. He's not having processed. No, if at 50 years old, if you are fighting hand-to-hand combat, spears, swords, shields, you're probably a pretty fit and intimidating individual. While details of Leonidas' early reign are scarce, his leadership is best understood through this prism of Thermopylae. And as we're going to see shortly, though Thermopylae is ultimately going to be a Greek defeat, the battle became a turning point in the Greco-Persian War, and it's a testament to Leonidas' strategic brilliance and unwavering courage. In stark contrast to this is Xerxes, ruler of the mighty Persian Empire. He was born around 518 BC, and he ascended to the throne following the death of his father, Darius, in 486 BC. He inherited a vast empire that stretched from the shores of Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey, to the banks of the Nile River. and it encompassed a diverse array of people, cultures, and territories. Xerxes' reign was characterized by his ambition to expand his boundaries beyond what is already an impressive empire. And so to this end, he embarked on a series of military campaigns aimed at subjugating neighboring lands and consolidating power. The invasion of Greece, which culminated at the Battle of Thermopylae, was perhaps his most audacious undertaking yet. Determined to avenge the defeat suffered by his father at the Battle of Marathon a decade earlier, Xerxes assembled a vast army and navy with one sole purpose: to crush the Greek city-states and to put them under his heel. So let's talk geography and strategy a little bit. In anticipation of the Persian invasion, the Greek city-states formed a defensive alliance known as the Hellenistic League, under the leadership of Sparta and Athens. Aware of the Persian numerical superiority, the Greeks devised a strategy to defend key strategic locations. And one of those is, you guessed it, Thermopylae. King Leonidas of Sparta, with his small force of 300 Spartans and a few thousand allies, was tasked with holding the pass at Thermopylae against the advancing Persians. For Leonidas, the narrow pass at Thermopylae was a godsend. It's flanked by mountains on one side and the sea on the other. The narrow pass created a bottleneck. The vast Persian army could not deploy its full force all at once, and this is going to negate their numerical advantage. Leonidas likely saw this as a perfect place to make a stand. Secondly, the Persians, known for their diverse but less disciplined army, were vulnerable to close counter combat. Leonidas likely planned to exploit this weakness by forcing the Persians into a confined space where their cavalry and archers would be less effective. And finally, we can't overlook the symbolism that holding the pass provided. Holding the pass, even with the potential for great sacrifice, would send a strong message of defiance and Greek unity to the Persians and the rest of Greece. Leonidas understood the power of this symbolism. So let's break down the battle, and remember, we have to take into account that we can't know for sure what happened, as ancient sources as well as scholars don't all agree. On the first day of the battle, the Persian army, like we said earlier, estimated in the hundreds of thousands, arrives at Thermopylae. Their diverse force, including heavily armored infantry, lightly armored archers, and cavalry, must have been an impressive and intimidating sight. King Xerxes likely wants to just assess the Greek defenses when he first gets there before committing his full force and gauge the morale of the enemy. This is most likely when the famous Palumbo exchange occurred. So let's talk about that. The iconic phrase Palumbo was uttered by King Leonidas, as we mentioned, probably on the first day of battle. We don't know the exact moment. Leonidas spoke these words when King Xerxes demanded that the Spartans surrender their weapon. Palumbo, or come and take them in English, signified the Spartans' refusal to yield their weapons and their determination to defend their position even to their own deaths. Leonidas and his Greek force probably numbered around 4,000 to 7,000, and their ranks consisted mostly of heavily armored hoplites. These guys have shields, heavy armor, swords, and spears. Their primary weapon was the dory, a long spear designed for thrusting in close quarter combat, and they would fight in a phalanx formation. This is a tightly packed unit where overlapping shields create a nearly impenetrable wall. In class, I like to talk about the phalanx as like a human tank. So before we even had the idea of a tank, we made a tank out of humans, right? So you make this interlocking wall of shields, you got your spears sticking out, and you slowly march towards the enemy, and they can't penetrate. So you basically run them over. Now, in this case, the phalanx is not moving. It's an impenetrable wall. The hoplites were positioned in multiple ranks, with fresh soldiers rotating in to replace those who tire or are wounded. The first day of battle ended in a stalemate. So let's move on to day 2. Frustrated by the lack of progress on the first day, Xerxes decided to unleash his elite force, known as the Immortals. The Immortals were a prestigious unit of the Persian army, known for their skill and bravery. They were heavily armored, they wielded spears and short swords, and they wore distinctive clothing to set them apart from the regular troops. The Immortals launched a frontal assault against the Greek phalanx. The fighting was fierce, but the Greeks held their ground. Their superior discipline and formation proved effective against the initial wave of Persian attacks. The Greeks used the limited space provided by Thermopylae Pass to their advantage, making it difficult for the Persians to maneuver and bringing their superior close combat skills into play. By the end of the second day, the determined Greeks remained unmoved. Well, the battle is going to take a sinister turn on the third day, when a traitor, a Greek named Ephialtes, lured by the promises of gold from the Persians, revealed a secret path through the mountains that bypassed Thermopylae. When the news of this betrayal reached Leonidas, it probably felt like being struck by a poison arrow. He knew the Persians would soon exploit the hidden path, rendering their position at Thermopylae unattainable. A terrible choice loomed before him. He could hold his ground and face certain annihilation, or retreat and preserve some of the Greeks' fighting force. In a tense meeting filled with hushed murmurs of worried soldiers, Leonidas laid out the grim situation. The discovery of the secret path meant that their position was compromised, and with a heavy heart he made a difficult decision to order the retreat of most of the Greek army. In Leonidas's mind, the strategic importance of preserving their forces outweighed his personal survival. He reasoned that by sending most of the army home while a small contingent remained would delay the Persians. This would buy the Greeks time to prepare their defenses, and if they can inflict heavy losses in the meantime, well, that's a bonus. Aware of their inevitable fate, the remaining Greeks that stayed behind fought with determined courage. Led by Leonidas, they launched a final fierce attack against the oncoming Persians. The Greeks held their ground with unwavering resolve, inflicting significant casualties on the enemy. Despite the odds, they continued to fight, driven by the desire to cause maximum damage and to die with honor, and die they all did, to the last man. There's a lack of certainty regarding what happened to Leonidas's body after the battle. Earlier accounts claim that Xerxes, the Persian king, was enraged by the stubborn resistance of the Greeks, particularly Leonidas. Herodotus, the famous Greek historian, claims that Xerxes ordered Leonidas's head to be severed, impaled on a spike, and his body to be crucified. This act was considered a great insult to the Greek world, as it denied a proper burial for fallen warriors. Later accounts suggest that the Greeks managed to recover Leonidas's body after the battle. In this version, it suggests a fierce struggle ensued between the Greeks and the Persians over the body, with the Greeks eventually prevailing. However, whether recovered by the Greeks or not, Leonidas' sacrifice and his stand at Thermopylae became a powerful symbol of Greek resistance and courage. The significance of the Battle of Thermopylae, again, despite being a tactical defeat for the Greeks, holds immense historical influence. First, it was an amazing symbol of resistance, as we've said earlier. An amazing act of defiance against an overwhelming enemy. Secondly, it was the turning point in the Greco-Persian Wars. Leonidas' gamble paid off because indeed his plan to remain behind and let most of the forces retreat gave the Greeks valuable time to defend, plan, and ultimately counterattack. Third, it bolstered Greek unity and identity. We have to remember at this time, Greece was a loose confederation of city-states. It wasn't a nation-state like it is today, where there's a common identity or there's something called Greek. More often than not, the Greeks fought amongst themselves, and yet in this instance, they united around a common enemy. Well, there you have it, folks, the battle at Thermopylae. No, it is not exactly like you see it in the movie 300, even though that's a pretty darn good movie. If you like this podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts and give me a 5-star rating. You would do me a bigger solid if you left a written review. You can also share this with your communist cousin. Share this with your friends. You can go to teacherspayteachers.com. I have activities, worksheets, assignments that you can use in your homeschool or classroom. Until next time, go throughout the land and proclaim liberty.